Could we see a significant trade sending Flyers captain Claude Giroux to the Colorado Avalanche? It appears the Avs have their eye on more than one superstar player. Plus, we also have a few other trade rumors around the league coming from Montreal and New Jersey we're going to talk about as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some NHL trade talk to look at here today. First up, I want to take a look at the New Jersey Devils. We do have word that one of the players they could be looking at here could be Pavel Zacha. Now, I've heard this from different sources, including Jeff Merrick and Elliotte Friedman, as well as Chris Johnson, mentioning that Zacha very well could be a trade piece. We know the Devils are not going to be a playoff team. Zacha's a player who kind of developed a little bit differently than they expected. He was a fairly high draft pick. Took a while to kind of come around. There was a point a few years ago, I think there was even, that they were contemplating moving on from him or getting him a fresh start somewhere else because they weren't quite getting the player that they expected to. But he certainly has blossomed into being a bit more of a player, but not quite the high-end talent. I think it's fair to say that they originally thought they were getting when he was first drafted. But Zacha is a guy who's got good size. He's pretty good on face-offs. He can play center and wing. So certainly will be a guy that I think will draw interest from a variety of NHL teams heading towards the playoffs. If they want another, middle six or bottom six, big body forward who can pitch in on face-offs and, a little bit of offense, and I think the Devils will get some interest. But they certainly have a lot of interesting young forwards, and it might be time to move on. And they are considering seeing what they can get for their former first-round selection. Now, we've talked a lot about the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, we've talked a lot about a variety of players, and I think we're going to see significant changes. And of course, with Marty St. Louis behind the bench now, it's apparent that, he's there to help take this team into the next phase. And he's certainly there to help figure out who should stay and who should go, along with GM Ken Hughes and Vice President of Hockey Operations Jeff Gorton. Now, one of the names that we're hearing likely is going to get moved is Christian Dvorak, who they spent a first-round pick getting from Arizona after they lost Jesperi Kotkaniemi to Carolina via the offer sheet this past offseason. But Christian Dvorak has had a miserable season. He hasn't quite fit in there. Now, not a guarantee that they trade him. They might feel that he's worth keeping around, and if they get him onto, at the beginning of the season, go through training camp with them a little bit more, effectively, because he certainly had a rough start to the season there as well. Like, he got into Montreal late. He had just bought a house. It was kind of an odd scenario personally going on for him. And of course, the whole team has struggled since then. So really, it probably would be wise that they might consider that this is not the player we normally would have. And, he can do better than this. Maybe we'll hang on to him. But there's a lot of Western teams, according to Elliotte Friedman, indicating that there's a lot of interest, saying that they're used to playing against him a lot more from his time in Arizona. They know what he's capable of. They don't think this is really all that, indication of what he's become, that he can certainly become that player he was in Arizona and can be a lot better than what he's shown this year in Montreal under some pretty tough conditions, we can say, and that there's a lot of interest. So we don't know exactly any specific teams but he's been linked to. I know originally it sounded like we were kind of limiting that to Western Canada, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I wouldn't even rule out, some of the California teams as well, even like a team like Anaheim, for example, or even the LA. Not for sure that they would do that, but, obviously I think there's a variety of different interest in there. He comes with term, very cost controlled if he can get back to playing the way he was. But at the same time, there might be trying to get him on the cheap. But really going to boil down to the asking price. I mean, they paid a lot to get him, and obviously he's not living up to that right now. So the value's down. So you might not, you got to be careful there. You don't want to sell too low and then not be able to have, a decent amount come back. So you're really in the negative. But I think Montreal understands that with a lot of their players, they might not have a choice but to find a way to move on. Like Jeff Petrie, for example, is getting more and more obvious every time. Like, to me, if I'd almost find a way just to sit him out, because you can tell he's not trying hard enough, and he's just not in it. Not only for the coaches, but for his teammates. It looks like it's getting very frustrating, not only for fans, but for teammates too. So we'll see where it goes, but Montreal's certainly going to be a very busy team here over the next month or so as they start to decide who stays and who goes. Now, the big team we want to talk about today is the Avalanche. There are multiple big time players that they are interested in at the trade deadline. They may not be able to do both of these moves, but there is some awfully heavy scouting going on between the Avalanche and the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers have had numerous scouts at not only the Avalanche games, but also at their American Hockey League affiliate games, the Colorado Eagles. Both teams have been heavily scouted. There's a lot of belief that the Avs are hardcore in on Claude Giroux. Of course, he will control that, but the information we've heard from a variety of sources indicates they believe that, as of right now at least, that he would waive to go to the Avs if they can work out a deal. That would be one of the teams that he would consider saying yes to. So they don't believe that, at least at this point, to really be an issue. Now, of course, there's a variety of players that is reportedly being watched here by the Flyers as they continue to have discussions. And I really don't think this is a trade we're going to see ahead of the deadline. I think Claude Giroux is on pace. If he stays healthy, which we certainly hope for his sake he does, he'll play game number 1,000 shortly before the NHL trade deadline. I think it would mean a lot to not only himself, but the team to see him do that in a Flyers uniform. So because of that, I think maybe we see a move a day or two ahead of the deadline. I don't know exactly when that last game would be. I think it's right around 2 or 3 days before the deadline. Maybe they jumped the gun a little bit by like a day or two, but otherwise it's likely going to come down to the wire here. Maybe they have something worked out if they can get to that point, that is. But we know that the Avalanche are not the only team that are interested. There's a variety of teams heading for the playoffs that are looking to add that, one more solid piece to go to the hopefully the Stanley Cup. And he's, got a lot of interest. He's a guy with a lot of experience. He's extremely talented offensively. He's not afraid to play a gritty game. He's not afraid to throw some hits around. He's got, been in the league a long time. He's been a captain a long time. So, decent leader. There's a lot of intangibles and a lot of on-ice things to really like about Giroux's game that could be a big addition to many teams. And the Avalanche feel like they're pretty darn close to being, that cup contender that should be having a real excellent shot. I mean, they had an undefeated in regulation month of January. This team has been extremely dominant, and they haven't had a full healthy lineup a lot of the time either. So imagine what happens when they do. Like McKinnon is not having a fantastic year because he's been in and out of the lineup. He had COVID. He's been injured. Like, they've had their fair share of stuff. Landeskog missed some time. Like, this team has not been at 100%, and they're still chugging along the way they are, which is extremely impressive. They can get healthy 100% ahead of the playoffs. It'll be extremely, scary for other teams to not want to play them and to run to them in the playoffs. Now, what kind of package would it take to get Claude Giroux down to the Avalanche organization? Now, it's believed that it could be 2 to 3 pieces here. There's a variety of prospects, and there could be other pieces involved. It doesn't mean it's going to be exactly this, but some of the players that were kind of led to believe that the Avalanche are likely interested in parting with, and the Flyers appear to be interested in, would be Tyson Jost. If there's the one player off the roster, Jost appears to be the main player. Now, of course, the cap situation is going to be kind of dependent here as well, and depends on what else they want to do. But for right now, Jost is a player. It's believed that there was previous interest in Alex Newhook, and that was shot down pretty quick from what we're led to believe. So Newhook is not a player the Flyers want to part with. But certainly I understand why there'd be interest in other teams. So certainly that doesn't seem like something they want to do. But Jost is in there as a player that, former first-round pick. He's been in the lineup, good amount of NHL experience, but never turned out to be that higher-end offensive player that they really thought he was going to be. Certainly a very serviceable forward, but not the talented forward that they thought. But maybe in a different role, maybe that can come out more. They're also looking at 2020 first-round pick and a good-sized defenseman from the Atlantic Canada here, Justin Barron. So that's a possibility of someone who could be moved. And Sampo Ranta as well, another interesting forward prospect with their 2018 third-round selection. They have some other forwards and other defenseman prospects that could be involved in the mix, but guys like Newhook and Byram are nothing that the Avalanche have interest in trading. So I believe that they're looking at the next level of prospects, and some combination of that would be likely what ends up happening, but there could be something else involved off the roster as well, depending on the cap situation at the time of the trade. Now, it's also believed that the Avalanche also have interest in Marc-Andre Fleury. Now, considering that Giroux and Fleury both come with a big ticket salary, that's going to be awfully tough to do. Even if Chicago retains half of Fleury and the Flyers retain half of Giroux, knocks it down, will make it more doable. But there might have to be more come off the roster to make it happen if they have any chance to do it. I know that I don't know what Fleury's feelings are when it comes to going to the Avalanche. I know it was reported before that the Capitals had recruited pretty hard and were shot down because the Blackhawks won't trade Fleury without his consent and where he's going. So that was not happening, at least not as of right now. So will he agree to Colorado? I don't know, but there is belief that both of these guys are something that the Avalanche want to do. Pavel Francouz would probably have to be moved as part of a deal to bring in a goaltender. There could be a third party involved as well. We know the Arizona Coyotes have some cap space, as well as teams like the Red Wings, maybe Ottawa, maybe Buffalo, that they could basically rent out cap space for, an extra asset. So if you're willing to throw in another second, third, fourth round pick, whatever it's going to take, depending on the amount, you get half retained by the trading team, another half by the third party, and then you basically get the player for substantially less, and that's how you make the math work, but it costs you more in assets to make it happen. So the Avalanche are really, really seriously interested here in loading up. And it said Chris Johnson's reporting that he doesn't know that they're going to be able to pull it off, but that's essentially that they do have interest in both guys. They might only be able to do one. Hard to say exactly what direction they go in, but like I said, we've also seen reports from Avalanche writer Adrian Dater, who's been attending a lot of the games, saying a high level of Flyer scout. So you know that there's indeed some pretty in-depth conversations taking place behind the scenes here right now, and I think it's looking decent that they could work something out. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. Things could fall apart. Another team could come in with a better offer. Hard to say, but we know the Avs are one of the league's top teams, and that they certainly want to go for it mode, especially where Vegas is, possibly having Mark Stone go on LTIR to bring in Jack Eichel. They're not going to have to move anybody out. They could be a scary team come playoffs if they're fully healthy too. So the Avs are going to have a lot on their hands here to try to fight their way through that Western Conference. I think the Vegas and Colorado, to me, would be my two teams I would probably predict right now have the best shot at winning the conference, and it's not going to be easy. Vegas has had Colorado's number the last few years, and we know that they need an extra something to kind of overcome that. So we'll see where this goes, but look for the Avalanche to possibly be big players ahead of the trade deadline. Let me know your thoughts on what we discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.